Good evening, everybody. This is Patrick from the Poison Pen Bookstore, and we're here tonight with the stellar, superlative Hank Phillippi Ryan. She's going to be talking about her brand new book, Her Perfect Life. And as always, Hank very kindly signed a batch of books for us, and I'll be putting that link in the comments field if you'd like to purchase a copy. And go ahead and send in any questions you might have for Hank. She's been a busy woman lately, so send in your questions and comments and things, and I'll be happy to reemerge and ask any of them. So in the meantime, over to you, Barbara.
Thank you very much, Patrick. So Hank and I have both dressed, excuse me, tastefully in black to match this gorgeous book cover. I want to say at the outset, Hank, this is a gorgeous cover. It is superlative.
Thank you. Barbara is saying superlative because that's what the Publisher's Weekly Starred Review called the book. So now Barbara will tease me with that for the rest of my life, and I embrace that completely. Yes, you know, I asked Forge. There's a woman, an artist called Katie Klimowitz at Forge, who is a genius. And I asked for enigmatic, elegant, sophisticated, mysterious, and I wanted the book to look like a jewel that you just couldn't help but touch. And you all, when you see the book in person, which I know you will, it's soft, it's lovely. So thank you. I am quite taken with it.
Well, and you have been unbelievably busy because I do the store Instagram, and every other Instagram that strolls by me, superlatively strolls by me, it's Hank, and it's this gorgeous book. So I feel like it's seared into my brain, this cover, which I love. So let me introduce Hank briefly, although I can't imagine that if you're watching this, that you need me to do this, but still. So Hank is, and part of what we're going to be talking about today is her astonishing career, superlative career, as an investigative reporter in Boston, and she's the winner of at least 37, possibly more, Emmys for her work there. And One Perfect Life, in point of fact, draws upon Hank's not only her journalism experience, but what it's like to be famous on whatever scale you might be.
You want to see? I'll show you that.
Ah, there they are. Oh, you've got them all on display. Why?
Yes, I don't usually. That? I don't. Well, because I don't usually show that.
Well, they're gorgeous. Hank and I actually had an interesting. I will leave the other author nameless, but at one of Hank's many events at the Poison Pen, we hooked up with another author who was, after I introduced Hank as the winner of multiple Emmys and all the rest of it, the first words out of his mouth is television's dead.
Television's dead. I remember that well.
You were making noises like a tea kettle going, you know, and I
No, I wasn't. No, I was being very polite and serene because everyone has the right to their opinion, even when they're so wrong.
Or so tone deaf,
never a dull
not paying attention. I know. But anyway, not only has she won all of these glorious journalism awards, but she has also been very kind and continues to be amazingly kind to other authors. She is so busy supporting them, interviewing. She can tell us about her podcast and our first chapter work and all the rest of it. She's a former president of Sisters in Crime and founder of Mystery Writers of America University. And she has won so many awards, I can't count them, but multiple Agatha Awards, Mary Higgins Clark Award. She's been nominated for the Anthony Award, and I've lost track. Do you actually count your awards? Can you tell me how many?
I'm so needy and unself-actualized. Yes, I can do that. My book, The Murder List, did win the Anthony for Best Novel of the Year and was nominated. The First to Lie was nominated this year. So it's great. I won 5 Agathas. You can see the teapots behind me. Those are the Agatha Awards. And 4 Anthonys and the Mary Higgins Clark Award and some others. But, you know, it's interesting because I'm old and I have written for 15 years now, I think. So it's just, you know, the idea that someone would love my books. I think every author that you've interviewed will tell you that that is the thing that's most important in the world. When someone reads the book that you've been working on for so long and they connect with it. And I think the book is fully formed when the reader reads it, then it comes to life. That's what I always think. That's when the book comes to life. So that's what the award is. That's what the reward is is having someone say, "Ooh, I love that book. I could just see that."
Indeed. And you're absolutely right. I think every book is different for every reader. Every reader's experience of a book is unique to that reader. And when so many readers come together and say, okay, it was special for me, whatever that means to each individual person, that's really an amazing achievement.
Well, thank you. I agree with you. And that's why we talk about words like relatable and connecting and putting yourself in someone else's shoes and feeling that you're in another world. I mean, in this pandemic crazy time, I always say it's always safe inside a book. And that's how I feel about writing. It's always safe inside a manuscript, although it's sometimes a little risky, but certainly always safe inside a book. You sort of surround yourself with another world. You're solving someone else's problems. You're deciding what you would do in this situation and sort of thinking about how you feel about what the character in the book does and understanding why they do it for them. And your mind is taken away. You're transported. You're entertained. And your thoughts start racing and you take yourself to other places. And that's why we read, right? That's why we love books, and that's why we often connect. I mean, you and I have connected on loving so many of the same books, and it works in the universe, right? In book world, you can go up to someone and say, "What are you reading?" and they tell you, and then you say, "Oh, I love that," and you're instantly friends.
That's absolutely true. I'm actually pretty good at picking out books that Hank will like, because I try not to ask her to come and help me promote one unless I feel sure that she will enjoy it. And the other day, I have to say, I turned down for the first time for a particular institution. I turned down a book event, and I got a letter back saying, why? And I was forced to say, because it was true, that I didn't like the book, and I was not able to sit here and have a conversation about a book that I really just can't, couldn't get into, can't support. And I'd rather say that outside the conversation than fake it all the way through when everybody would know that I was doing that. And I'm impressed, Hank, that you have done, I mean, you talk about 2 or 3 books a week on various media. And then of course you're working on your own. So you must spend a lot of time reading in addition to a lot of time on camera.
Thank you. I do spend a lot of time reading. I really love it. My husband and I are here right outside of Boston, Massachusetts, and we're here by ourselves. And reading is a wonderful thing that we do. Float out on the pool in the backyard sometimes, or just cozying up in the chair in the study, or before we go to sleep, something like that. I've also just discovered reading on an e-reader. This is me swiping the pages. Reading on an e-reader on the treadmill. And that has been life-changing. It's so efficient and it makes me stay exercising longer, and it's so much fun to read that way. So yes, I do love to read, and you do too. I mean, how many books do you read, for goodness sake, and for how many years have you done that?
Well, that comes to an interesting point. Hank mentioned just a little while ago that she's old. Well, I'm a decade older than Hank, but I think the two of us are kind of icons for aging well. I won't give away the actual numbers, but the truth is, that when I was young, I couldn't have imagined anybody as old as I am actually even being able to, to function, let alone keep up our workload and read and so forth. And so there's a lot to be said. I have an exercise hole that I bought, and I read while I'm doing that, which treadmill doesn't work as well for me. And you're right, it really helps until the puppies came along, which I have to tell you has been a total time sink for the last 3 weeks. I'd forgotten how much energy babies take. I mean, it's been 60 years since I had babies, and it's constant.
I can't believe you both have puppies. That is really brave of you, is the word I'm looking for. It's really brave, but it must be.
They are just beyond cute, but no kidding, they are exhausting. And the best part, we're going to talk about your book here in a minute, but the best part was the breeder using the excuse that she didn't want her household exposed to COVID. So instead, she brings the puppies to potential owners, which I think is a really brilliant stratagem, because why wouldn't you want to see the home. That
True.
if you love your, your little babies that you have bred, and they're like 8 weeks old when this happens, so they're really little. Why wouldn't you want to check it out before before you relinquish them? So she came, and we did the whole thing, and they're out in the garden romping around, and we're having a wonderful time. And as she leaves, she said to me, I'm really glad I brought up the puppies. And she said, I had a sad experience at Sun City West. She said, I took a puppy out, and they were just too old. I think they were in their early 70s. So I tried to keep a straight face. I was spooked. I said,
you're right,
these
because
are probably our last puppies. I said,
But it's true. It's all about perspective, isn't it? When I started writing my first book, Primetime, so long ago, not that long ago, when I started writing my book, Primetime, my agent at the time, who was wonderful, said to me, I love this book. It's about a smart woman, not 21 anymore, who, it's not about getting her first job and her first pair of shoes. Primetime is really about a competent, strong, successful woman in the world. And I said, oh, great. She said, and the world is really ready for an older protagonist. So I said, that's great. And she said, but how old is Charlotte actually in the book? And I said, well, I made her my age. She's 55. And she says, oh, that's too old. I thought, wait, I made her my age is what I said. And now you are just telling me that that's too old. So you all in the audience will be happy to know that I said to her, how about 46? Is 46 too old? And she says, no, 46 is not too old. So all of you who are 46 and younger, all good, you're fine. You can still be main character.
I can remember my mother at some point. My mother lived to be 96. And I remember at some point somebody, maybe one of the grandkids, said to her, looking back, what's the age you most like to be? And she said 50 is the perfect age. If she could go back or she could just like freeze frame at 50. She said, you've gotten your children raised, you've made your life decisions, you've, been however to a great degree successful you're going to be. And so you're relatively carefree and, but yet you're young enough you have enough energy. And I thought, okay, at the time I thought 50, seriously? And then I realized that I started the bookstore 31 years ago when I was 50. Yeah. And, looking back, I really agree with Mom that 50 would be an ideal age. And I do think there are more books, don't you, Hank, where the female protagonist is now allowed to be older?
Yes. I mean, I didn't start writing books till I was 55, as I said, and I'm writing my 14th book now. So that's how much time has gone by. And I think at that time of your life, are you all interested in this? I'm looking at the chat. Are you all interested in this? But I think it's interesting because I'm sort of the poster child, and you too, definitely you too, for following your dreams at midlife. And I think that one of the things that we can decide at that age is, you know what, I'm going to do this. I'm going to go for this. I'm going to try this now, because if not now, when am I going to do it? And you just think, and if it doesn't work, it doesn't work, whatever, it's fine, I'll be fine, it's all good. And there's a power in that. There's a confidence in that. There's an understanding as an experienced adult that what's the worst that could happen? It wouldn't work, and you don't even know if that would be a bad thing. It might be the best thing that ever happened to you. So that adventure is the part that we are less fearful of now. And I think that's all a part of it, definitely.
Oh, so. You're absolutely right. When you're a teenager, you are convinced that every eye in every room is riveted upon you, and you're so extraordinarily self-conscious. It's even harder for women because they think there's more pressure on women to present well. I've had this conversation recently with a number of authors, and Hank, it's been interesting, and then we're going to feed right into your book, that recently I've read a spate of books written by much younger authors, and I find myself kind of blinking at the universe that they are writing about, because I feel as though it's a land far, far away, sort of like Oz when I was young. I was, it's good to do that. It's good to catch up, with experiences that are less common to us. So let's talk about Perfect Lily, #Perfect Lily. Because Boston's Channel 6 News investigative reporter Lily Atwood must, if not be perfect, at least appear perfect. when she's on the air. So you must have gotten the idea for this wonderful book, this superlative book, from your own life, because there is pressure, isn't there, to be like that when you're on the air.
Well, there are a couple of things about this and a couple of stories I can tell you. But the first one is when I started in television all those years ago, and I was new, and I was one morning I was at the laundromat. That's how exciting and glamorous my job is. I was at the laundromat, and a woman came up to me and she said, "Oh, aren't you Hank from Channel 13?" This was in Indianapolis. And I said, "Yes, hi." And she said, "Oh, I love you. I love your work on television. I can't wait to talk with you. I've got a story for you. And let me tell you about my life story." And she began to tell me about her life and her story. And of course, as a reporter, I embraced that. I ask for that on television. I say, "Tell me your stories. Tell me your ideas. Tell me something I should look into." So I request that, and I love it. But I thought, she's talking to me at the laundromat. So I was nice, and you want to listen to every story because it might be the story of the century, and I don't care where I hear it if it's the story of the century. But I went home, and I was 26, and I called my mom, and I said, "Mom, can you believe it? Somebody came up to me in the laundromat, and she's talking to me. I'm whining." And my mother paused, and she said, "Sweetheart, you chose the spotlight. Welcome to the spotlight." And she said, "And I never want to hear you complain about that again." And that was a life-changing moment, because that's true. That is very true. So fast forwarding though to Perfect Lily and her 7-year-old daughter, Rowan. Her 7-year-old daughter, Rowan, didn't pick the spotlight. So Lily is always in the spotlight. And then briefly, if I could tell you, Lily Atwood has everything. As you say, she has fame, she has fortune, she has Emmys. She's a single mom to an adorable 7-year-old daughter. But Lily also has a big secret. And she realizes that it's impossible to keep a secret when you're always in the spotlight. Everybody knows Lily Atwood, and that may be her problem. And she begins to learn that the spotlight is the most dangerous place of all. And yes, you are so completely right. I've experienced that on every level. And the perfection part, think about being a television reporter. I can never be wrong. I can never call someone the wrong name. I can never choose the wrong word. I can never miscalculate. I can never misinterpret statistics. I can never be 1 second late. Not 1 second late. And I have to do it all looking camera ready, no matter if it's raining or if there's tear gas or if there's a hurricane or if the wind is blowing in the wrong direction, so I can't have the fire behind me. And lights have fallen on me, or people have yelled at me, and the sirens go by and the church bells go off, or Jonathan walks behind me in the shot. And I have to make it look like everything is just fine, like there's no problem, that I'm in control, when most of the time in live television, at any second, something could go wrong, any second. And often you can't predict what that will be. So that pressure and then think about it. If I do make a mistake, if a reporter does make a mistake, they're going to be yelled at and threatened and slapped with lawsuits, and they'll be humiliated and embarrassed. I've only made, knock on wood, 2 mistakes that I can tell you about. And so it's humiliating and embarrassing to make a mistake. It's the worst thing that can happen to a reporter, is to make a mistake. And that's perfection. That is the impossibility of being perfect. And that is the reality of being a reporter. Not to mention in public, where you have to be the person that people think you are. So, I will confess to you that back in the before times, when I was in malls, shopping malls, I would actively put a pleasant expression on my face as I was walking along. So people would think, "Oh, she seems nice." And how weird is that? That is strange and weird and unusual. And that is part of what Her Perfect Life is about, the impossibility of keeping that tightrope, walking that tightrope, especially if you have a really dark secret.
Well, yeah, obviously the really dark secret is what introduces the suspense and the tension and so forth in the book. But, thinking about it, I remember when we did our first of now 500 and some Zoom events, and how self-conscious we felt. It's different when you have your face, in front of a screen than when you're sitting, in the store in front of a live audience. And then I've realized as we've done this that we can just relax into it, because the possibilities for mistakes, for Zoom failing, various things are very large. And if you let them throw
Yes,
you,
they
and if you, panic or look embarrassed or whatever it is, then it's worse. So we've learned to be completely relaxed. The only true moment of panic I had is we were doing an event with an Oxford professor. He was in Oxford, an expert on gardening, and he's an expert on the economics of England's garden heritage and what it contributes to the economy and so forth. So it wasn't like your typical walk through gorgeous gardens. And we had a power failure. And so I'm booted off. And just as I was going, I saw his face. He sort of panicked, because this isn't his natural. And I thought, what am I going to do? Because you know how technically incompetent I am, but I had my phone. And I thought, well, there must be. So, just sort of noodling around, I finally figured out how to get back into the conversation using my phone.
And talk about empowerment, right? You did it, you beat the technology, and then you feel that you can do it again. I do agree that the bar is kind of low on Zoom events now, when the puppy walks through, or when something crashes, or the light goes out, or something goes wrong. I mean, I was in First Chapter Fun a while ago doing my live reading of some wonderful author's book, and Jonathan in the other room forgot that First Chapter Fun was on live and started printing from the printer, which is 2 feet away from me, and you hear this ring, 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 and there's no way for me to stop the printer. So I just read on. I said, Jonathan's printing something, and everybody at home says, no, okay, that happened to me. So, but we're so, thankful for Zoom as well. We would not be, I can't think of, for the past however many years, 8, every Wednesday morning after the Tuesday of my book launch, I've gotten on an airplane and flown to Phoenix to see you. And by the happiness of time zones, I can leave Boston at a reasonable time and arrive in Scottsdale at a reasonable time. And we have our annual chat, which I look forward to so deeply. Plus, I got to have popcorners on JetBlue. I think that was when I was introduced to those wonderful confections. So it is a little poignant to talk with you on Zoom tonight, but certainly better, and all of you on Zoom. And that's the other thing, is that so many people are here from so many other places. That wouldn't happen if we were in Scottsdale. So there's the good news and the bad news.
Oh, there's a lot of good news. We've had, we're absolutely fascinated by the people who join us from places like Zimbabwe or Finland or New Zealand or whatever. And I do love the idea that not only might they join us live, but because time zones are not uniform, and it can be a real challenge, by leaving up the video programs on our Facebook page, and you don't have to belong to Facebook in order to watch it and enjoy it. We wind up with an audience much, much larger than we would ever achieve, here, because geographical boundaries and really time zone boundaries go away under those conditions. But let's go back.
You've really created, I would love to go back to the book, but let me just say quickly that Poison Pen and you have really created this new book TV, that at any time of day or night, anywhere in the world, you can come to the Poison Pen Facebook page and just choose, like a beautiful box of chocolates, to listen to an author whose new book is out. That is such a benefit, and that is such an archive, and such a service that you're doing.
Well, we really love it. The most interesting part to me has been the podcast. There are over 115,000 downloads now. And I found, not everybody wants to sit in front of a screen. And, you're mentioning you read electronically while you're on the treadmill or something, but loads of people are happy to listen to our conversation. Sure. Especially, I think, if they've ever seen us, so then, seen you, so there's a face to the voice.
Sure.
But that is a new dimension that that Zoom allows, that you can use the recording. And I do find, and also you can share recordings. We hosted an event for a local Sisters in Crime show on Saturday. And if they want to share the Ann Cleves conversation that they had, then, then we can magnify that conversation by using the platform. But let's go back to Lily, because unsurprisingly, she's in Boston. She is a TV reporter, an investigative reporter in Boston. So Hank, tell me what's the difference between an investigative reporter and other possible jobs in television. I mean, you could be a weatherman, you could be a talk show host. What's an investigative reporter's remit?
Well, that's a great question. In the reporter ranks at a television station, there are generally two kinds of reporters. They're what we call general assignment reporters and investigative reporters. And then anchor people are sort of in a different world. Anchor people have a different job. But reporters and general assignment reporter will come in the morning. Their shift, whether it's 7 to 3 or 8 to 4, or 9 to 5 or 10 to 6 or the late shifts or whatever it is, come in and either have a story idea or go to the assignment desk, and they're told, go to City Hall, go to the school committee meeting, there's a murder, there's a cat show, there's a political campaign that you're covering. And you will do that story probably for the noon news, the 4 o'clock news, the 5 o'clock news, the 6 o'clock news, potentially the 10 o'clock news, and the 11 o'clock news. And every one of those stories has to be different and updated. And that story will be on that day. So you go in at 9, say 9 to 5, you go in at 9, and you do your research, you do your interviews, you shoot your videos, you come back to the station, you put the story together in the edit booth, you present that on television, or you do it live from the scene. And after your story is over at 6 o'clock, you go home. That story is over and you're done. And the next day you do it again. And I did that from 1975 to 1988. A general assignment reporter. And for a while, I was the funny one. I was called something out of nothing productions, because if there was no news, they'd just say, send Hank out, she'll be able to find something. So I did poems and songs and cat shows and the basketball finals and, everything. And then in about 1988, I said to my news director, I don't think I'm the funny one. I was the funny reporter. I don't think I'm the funny one. I think I'm the investigative one. And they sent me to cover the Democratic National Convention and the Republican National Convention. And I did what they call big think pieces, longer form stories about politics and about government and about the elections. And when I came back, they said, you're right, you are the investigative reporter. So an investigative reporter. Oh, and there's another thing called a feature reporter. A feature reporter does the fun, funny stories, the quirky stories. And I did that for a year in Atlanta. In 1980, every Monday morning, I had a map of Georgia on my office wall, and I would close my eyes and just point. And wherever my finger pointed, my photographer and I would go, and we'd just look for stories about real life, about how people were coping with real life. I did a story and we just did the stories that we found. So we never knew what we were going to encounter. It was called Main Street. And that was my very first Emmy for those in-depth, but surprising, unplanned stories about how people really live and how they cope. And they were great. I'm still proud of those. So an investigative reporter, which I started being in 1988, those are in-depth, long-term, highly researched stories that are longer on the air and take much longer time to research and create and edit and write and do the interviews and put the story together. They may be 5 minutes long, 6 minutes long, and they may take, I've done stories that took me a year. I mean, I'm doing other stories along the way, but those are long-term, long-form stories. So an investigative reporter is on the air less. So you'll see me on TV less than a general assignment reporter who's on every day. An investigative reporter, like I am, is on only when they have a really terrific story. So the difference, and it's interesting because this is what Lily is, Lily Atwood in Her Perfect Life is an investigative reporter. She's not on the air every day. So someone who's a general assignment reporter, I hope this is interesting, you guys. Someone who is a general assignment reporter if their story isn't wonderful, if it isn't the best story about the school committee meeting that there's ever been, that's okay, because the next day they may have the best story in the world, and that's fine. You do your story, it's over. But an investigative reporter has to hit it out of the ballpark every time, because an investigative reporter is expensive, because they are paying you a salary every day to just do something that's not necessarily going to be on the air. So there's a lot of stress and a lot of pressure to be perfect and wonderful and sensational, in a good way, sensational, and blockbuster, groundbreaking lead stories. And that's what an investigative reporter has to do. So, and the thing about being an investigative reporter is every one of those Emmys that we saw earlier obviously represents one of those investigative stories. And a lot of good is done with those stories. We've had laws change and lives change. We've gotten people's homes out of foreclosure and millions of dollars in refunds and restitution for consumers as a result of those stories. But also, every single one of those stories made someone not like me. They made me an enemy, because every one of those stories is a secret that someone didn't want me to tell. I had a news director once who said, a good investigative reporter comes to town and works until everyone hates them. And luckily Massachusetts is big and has a lot of stories, so I've got some years to go. But you see, it's instantly contentious. It's instantly argumentative. It's instantly aggressive. When I started writing books and started doing interviews like this and talks like this, I had people in Massachusetts come up to me and say, I've never seen you smile. I've never seen you laugh, because I was the tough one. I'm the tough one. So that's what an investigative story, what an investigative reporter does. Big picture, hard-edged, big changes, big risks, and a little bit of a danger. And that's what Lily is facing too. So that's why Lily doesn't have to be on the air every day. Because she and her producer Greer are working on longer form stories. That explain it? And an anchor person is more of a performer. That's a tightrope. Oh my golly, that's a tightrope, because again, they're getting scripts and they're getting changes and they're getting changes in their computers, and they have to look like everything is just fine and they know what they're talking about, even when they have no idea. And then the live reporters who are doing live shots, those people are really walking a tightrope. And I did that for years too, because just like imagine a Zoom, only you're on live on television, and it's just utter and complete chaos and liveness behind you. And that liveness is a word. And that's also a risk.
Well, I can certainly see that there's a difference between being familiar and being famous. And your general assignment reporter might be a familiar figure, but it's the investigative reporter, anchors separately because they become famous for different reasons, would be the ones that are controversial, as you say, that are bound to make enemies, but also are more likely to be famous. I remember years ago, I did way long ago, on early television here in Scottsdale, Dave Barry with his first thriller came to, I think we launched it actually. And that very morning he was on the Today Show. So I was terrified about talking to Dave Barry in the first place. Who wouldn't be, right? And following the Today Show, I thought, help. So I got up at 5 o'clock and watched the Today Show and terrified myself. And then Dave got on a plane and came to Scottsdale. We sat down in front of the camera. And right before we started, I said, Dave, I got up at 5 o'clock this morning and terrified myself by watching you on the Today Show. And he looked at me and he said, that was all about them, he said, but this is going to be all about me, right? And then I realized, what he was saying, that I was there to focus on him, and I have read his book, and we're going to have a really in-depth conversation and all. Where the Today Show, as you point out, they haven't read the book, or they might have, but it's really unlikely. They've got some sort of, little script that they've got, and Dave probably doesn't even get to say much. I think of that when I watch Daniel Silva on the Today Show, because he hardly ever gets to say anything. Really, no, I'm
Well, think
serious.
about those people have a very difficult job. Think about that. They are on
Yeah,
live for 3 hours,
yeah,
5-minute segments. They could study all day and all night and never catch up. And so they rely on their own fast-paced brains. I mean, those people can soak up information. It's unbelievable and be poised. And they work with a producer, just like Lily does in Her Perfect Life. They work with a producer, and they share information and they access information, and they have a rhythm where I'll tell you that, I tell you, remember in broadcast news when the
yeah.
anchor person has the earpiece in and his producer is telling him stuff to say on the air. And that is not unusual. And wow, to be able to do that with some grace and confidence is a very, very difficult. And the thing about the Today Show, though, that's so intimidating, or any of those shows, CBS Morning News or ABC Good Morning America, any of those, is that there are, millions of people watching.
Yeah.
So you could just sit there and hold up your book for 7 million people, and you don't have to say anything because something is going to make a difference. So it is a real tightrope. It is a real tightrope of a job. I mean, people come up to me on the street and either say, strangers, now I'm talking about strangers, and either say, "Oh, Hank, I love you." I mean, a stranger. Or they'll say, "Oh, Hank, you're the one who did the story about X, Y, and Z. How could you do that?" And you just have to be ready for either of those reactions.
You do, but then
That's
think
the job
about
I take.
influencers, Hank. There was a big piece. Was it in the New York Times this week? I can't remember. Anyway, the damage that that teenage girls are suffering watching perfect people on Instagram, watching these influencers and so forth, and you realize that while influencing has actually become a profession with a payoff of some kind and all, that there's this tremendous drive in so many people to be famous.
And what even is that? I mean, and fame, and this is the thing about writing about the spotlight that I was so intrigued about
Yeah.
in Her Perfect Life, is to sort of show, I mean, the idea for Her Perfect Life specifically came from this very thing that you're talking about. When I worked in Atlanta in the early 80s, I was the weekend anchor. I was the political reporter, another genre of reporting. I was the political reporter and the weekend anchor. And one Saturday night, I had finished anchoring the weekend news, and it was maybe midnight, later than that, and I was driving home, and I turned down my street, Park Street in Atlanta, and I see millions of blue lights of police cars swirling around. And my first thought was, oh, there must be a crime scene here, because I've, been to a million crime scenes. And as I got a little bit closer, I realized the crime scene was my house, and these police cars were around my house. So I slammed into a parking place and leaped out of the car, and ran to the police officer. And I said, "I'm Hank Phillippi and he said, "I know who you are." And I said, "Oh, well, what happened? That's my house." And he said, "I know. We caught someone breaking into your house." And it was before people had home security systems. And apparently some neighbor had reported it. He said, "Some guy broke into your house, and there he is in the cruiser over there." And when we asked him why he did it, he said he knew you were anchoring the news live at the station, so he knew you weren't home. So because he knew where I was, he also knew where I wasn't. And that was so disturbing and so haunting to me, because I started thinking about the vulnerability of people who were on. I mean, I'm not famous like Lily is, and so even more intensified for her. But they know where she is, and they know where she isn't. They know where she goes to work, and they could follow her home. They have to do is get into, follow her out of the parking lot. They know where she goes to the grocery. They know where her daughter goes to school. They're curious about her and curious about her life. And she's a single mom. And who is Rowan's father? And, there's a scene in my book where a woman comes up to Lily and Rowan at the grocery store. And she's all, "Can I take a selfie with you? Can I?" And Lily sort of pushes her daughter away and says, "Not a Rowan, please." And she's so very nice about it. And this woman says, "Oh, you television people, you think you're better than everyone." And Lily This woman thinks she knows her because she sees her in her living room every day. She thinks it's okay to take a picture of her daughter. And then when Lily tries to protect her daughter, she's angry at her and dismisses her and says, I'll never watch you again. And there you go. And so that's the pressure that is on people like Lily in her perfect life all the time. And since she has this secret, at every turn, she's worried that someone will reveal it. And at some point, we know she's looking for her missing sister, Cassie, who disappeared when Lily was a little girl. And she begins to fear that she's looked for Cassie her whole life. And at some point, she begins to worry that it might be worse to find her than it would be to have her stay away. And that, that's quite an emotional conflict for her. But also the book is about the difficulty of motherhood and the difficulty of, no matter what profession you're in, of keeping your children safe, of keeping the privacy of your family separate from your professional life. And people, even, people who, television aside, all that fame stuff aside, all of us feel that connection with our sisters and family, and all of us feel that connection with our children, and that sort of need to make sure that they're safe, and knowing that they did not choose the life that they were given, and we need to make sure that we keep them safe no matter what our life is.
Well, you're certainly right that, being famous yourself risks the people around you, risks your children, hopefully not your puppies, but definitely does that. I was thinking that because I do the stories, I don't actually do any social media myself personally, because there's so many dangers involved in it.
Mm-hmm.
And, they're always telling you, not to show your vacation pictures while you're traveling and stuff, because as you point out, it says to people where you're not, and makes you vulnerable. But anyway, I can't help but have Instagram posts of Chrissy Teigen go passing me by, and they are remarkably candid. But what they also are full of her children. And I really object to that. I saw one the other day where the little boy, looks so much like his father. And I thought, these kids didn't choose this. They did not choose to be in the spotlight. And then, there's a lawsuit, you probably read about it, about the little boy naked on the cover of whatever it is, the record album or something. Now he's 30 and he was, a few months old or something. And I guess, he's basically saying, I didn't consent, to being made famous in this photo.
Someone in the chat will be able to tell us what record album that is. That just has gone completely out of my brain, but I know it perfectly. Yeah, all those kinds of things. We're being much more aware of that now. And that's one of the things that I really wanted to address in Her Perfect Life. I want people to watch TV in a different way, to think about reporters that they see in a different way. I mean, no one wants to hear, including my mom. Patrick is saying, never mind by Nirvana. Thank you, genius. Nobody wants to hear people whining about being famous. Lily is extremely famous. I'm a little television reporter. Lily is extremely famous. She's Today Show famous. She walks down the street and people know who she is. And she is not complaining about it. She is not complaining about it. She is aware that she chose it. But the collateral damage to people's lives for envy, for revenge, for manipulation, for mind games, for gaslighting, for, how far would someone go to get what they want? And when you're a public person, the possible ammunition that people have is really great, because it's not only your personality and your life, it's your career and your family. That's absolutely at stake every minute of every day. And that's what Lily is facing.
Well, this is also true, people who choose to go into politics. You're basically issuing an invitation for people to mine your life and, and become a story. You would then become the story. But, your mom was right. If you chose the spotlight, you don't get to complain about it. Tell us a little bit about the producer, about Greer Whitfield, because, she's another woman that goes through this book, and she's a really interesting character too.
Thank you. Greer Whitfield is Lily's producer, and a producer-reporter team is quite a unique pairing, because A producer and a reporter don't get to choose each other. They don't get to choose who they work with. They're just assigned. A news director will say, Sally, you're working with Jimmy. And you're like, okay, that's great. And the reporter is on the air. The reporter reports and does research and does shooting and does interviews and all those kinds of things. And the producer does exactly the same kinds of things and also does the scheduling and that kind of more administrative stuff. But everybody, we both write, we both produce, we both make decisions, we both do interviews. It's a very team effort, but the reporter is on the air. So a producer has to be a very special kind of person, someone who is willing or even eager, and most good producers are even eager to work on something when someone else will get the credit. And that is a very difficult situation for some mentalities. And even if you think it's fine, and even if you say, oh, no, I would never want to be on TV. Oh, no, I don't need to take the credit. At some point, as the acclaim for your partner, your reporter partner, grows and grows and grows, you can imagine Greer Whitfield, the producer, saying, oh, congratulations, Lily, that's great. Or congratulations on your next award. Or yes, that was a wonderful story. Everybody loved your story. They don't call it our story. It's your story. And you can see how that, I say in the book, there's a line that says, praise is such a sister to envy, because at some point that praise and that acclamation comes from, oh, congratulations, to why does she always get all the credit, to I really think I should get some of the credit. And then it grows into, I'm going to take the credit. You see how that incremental burbling of animosity and envy can really be destructive. And I write psychological thrillers, and that's what that's about. How it's the damage that human beings cause to each other by gaslighting and mind games and manipulation, and this incremental wanting of something that grows, changes, evolves into taking something, all the while rationalizing that you deserve this, you deserve to have that, and the other person doesn't deserve to have that, and they've won long enough, and it's time for you to win. And that's who Greer is. And she's always, when you read this, and I hope you do, all of you who are listening, when you read this, understand Greer. She is doing her job. She is doing what she thinks her job is. She and Lily are not friends. And the other thing to remember about Greer is I wrote her in first person. So you really are inside her head. But remember, when she talks about Lily, this is what she thinks about Lily, not the truth about Lily. And my goal in making her be first person was to be sort of a warning, to be sort of a object lesson, to say to people, just because someone tells you something doesn't mean it's true. Greer is the vox pop. Greer is the voice of the people. Greer is your friend who's telling you something. But what if she's wrong? So don't let Greer convince you that what she thinks about Lily is right. And that was my goal, to have you at the end say, oh, I see what Greer is. And she's doing her job. She's doing her job beautifully and reliably. But what does that mean? What does that mean? So it's kind of a great relationship between Greer and Lily, and little Rowan, Lily's 7-year-old daughter, I loved Rowan. I don't know where she came from, but her adorable voice. She's mischievous. She's smart. She's polite. She's really funny. She writes poetry. She's 7. She loves penguins. She pushes Lily a little bit. She's seeing how many boundaries she can push. And Lily pushes right back. And won't negotiate with her 7-year-old daughter. They're really a good team. And I had so much fun showing readers that relationship. That's how you should understand Lily, by how much she cares about her little Rowan and what happens to Rowan.
Well, certainly a story like this is relationship driven. I mean, obviously you have a plot, and obviously we're dancing around what Willie's big secret is, because
We are indeed.
why would you read? Well, anyway, we can't talk about it, but yeah, it's definitely relationship driven. Also thinking about, Greer in that particular job, you're right that one part of it is envy and, oh, I can do this. But another part is that if your reporter flops, then your career may also flop. So,
100%.
you've got to be really careful about trying to undermine the career of the person you're so attached to, because if it doesn't open a door for you, it opens the door for you to exit.
Exactly. So no matter
that's
how
a really complicated balance for her to do. I don't think anybody else could have written this particular book. I mean, you've obviously lived a dramatic part of it. And, I was also thinking, listening to you talk about the role of investigative reporter, it really prepared you for being a novelist, didn't it?
the thick skin part, or
No,
the story writing part?
the pursuing, the pursuing a story. I mean,
Yes.
all of the things that go into it, the research and, the interviews and all, because, you're crafting a story as an investigative reporter, and that same skill set would move over to, to writing a book where you have to imagine it rather than being assigned to it. But,
No question about it. Lee Child and I have talked about this on a couple of levels. He was in journalism too, obviously, of course, and neither of us use an outline. I don't use an outline. I don't have any idea what's going to happen next until I write the next sentence and the next paragraph and the next scene. But that's exactly like being a news reporter. I don't know what's going to happen in my stories that I pursue. If I knew, then they wouldn't be new. So as an investigative reporter, I'm out searching for the story, and I have no doubt that I will find the story, or even find out that it isn't a story. It happens equally often, not equally often, but it happens.
Yeah.
So as a writer, though, as a writer of fiction, I sit at my computer and I am in search of the story. What might have happened? What would somebody really say? What does somebody want, and how far will they go to get it? What would somebody really do? What might happen next as the story unfolds? And so that sort of thought process of telling a story with a beginning, a middle, and an end, which I have done every day as a reporter, with a character who you care about and a problem that needs to be solved, an important problem, where the good guys win and the bad guys get what's coming to them, where you're tracking down clues and following leads. And in the end, you want some justice and you want to change the world a little bit. And whether that's as an investigative reporter or whether that's as a crime fiction author, that's the same. So that's so well said, is that there is no better, except for maybe a lawyer is equally, but there's a different writing style involved in law. So yeah, I'm going to say flat out, there's no better training for being a storyteller of fiction than the essence, the elements of writing and doing an investigative story. Absolutely. So.
Plus the discipline of journalism and writing, I mean, we've heard lots of different authors, Michael Connelly and so forth, talking about, you can't show up and just say, Mike Lupica and I were talking in Harlan. We did an event last week about Mike's new Jesse Stone. And Mike pointed out, you can't show up at the paper and say, just not feeling it today.
Oh, 100%. I say to people all the time, if I said to my news director, can I be on the 6 o'clock news at 10 after 6? Because I'm not feeling it. I'm not feeling the muse today. I'd be gone, There's that wonderful Peter DeVries quote about, I only write when I'm inspired, and I make sure I'm inspired every morning at 9:15. And that's sort of the way it goes.
Well, absolutely true. Why don't we call Patrick up from the Briny Deep here and see if he has questions of his own or comments from the audience. Hello.
There. Hank, you've been kind of paying attention to the comments too, haven't you, as we go along?
No, I haven't seen them. I can't see any of the comments. I'm just so frustrated. I keep looking over here and there. I don't see them.
No problem. There was a question, an interesting one about, I can't remember who it was, but somebody asked, what is the best piece of advice you've received from another author, and the worst piece of advice? Have there been both?
Yes, there have been both. The best piece of advice I've received from an author actually was Julia Cameron, who wrote The Artist's Way.
Right.
And she said something along the lines of, everything you worry about isn't going to happen. And when you do worry, the thing that you did worry about isn't as bad as you thought it was and might be really great. And I have sort of learned from that a little bit. That's kind of a hard lesson because as a reporter and as a writer, I'm kind of a big worrier. I'm a super worrier. And I always, I think, what about this? And what about this? And what if this happens? And what if this goes wrong? And what if I do this? And what if I'm not perfect? And all those kinds of things, which is what the book is about. And, she sort of taught me, like Sue Grafton taught me, as you well know, Barbara, get over yourself. You're just writing a book. It's not that big of a deal. And so I always think of Sue as well and Julia in that kind of just stop being so freaked out about everything. And the worst piece of advice was someone who will remain nameless, who told me not to worry about deadlines. It's that time is just a construct and that deadlines don't matter. And that's just not true.
Not if you want to be successfully published, it doesn't, because your publisher will simply substitute somebody else for your slot if you don't happen to make your deadline. Although they can be very kind when you are in difficult situations. I don't think it's fair to say the publishers are unforgiving because,
but it's your job as a reporter. As a reporter, as a writer and a reporter, it's your job to keep your promise. You said this would be delivered on a certain day. And no matter what happens, pretty much that's what's going to happen. And the other piece of really good writing advice is sort of allow yourself to be terrible. There are days when I think, oh my golly, I just wrote the worst sentence that I've ever written in my entire life. In the world, there's no one who's written a worse sentence than that. And then I think that's okay. Just try it again, write another sentence, write another bad sentence, and then write another bad sentence. And at some point, as the bad sentences continue, you get a good one. And then you think, oh, that's what those other sentences meant. And then they become something different. So just persevere, just keep going. I have a sticky on my computer somewhere that just says, advance the story. And as James Patterson says, be there in the story. And once you're in the story will flow.
Very true. And, until it's published, you always have the luxury of editing.
100%. Not a test.
Readers often surmise that the book they've gotten, Her Perfect Life, was always like this. But the truth is, it may have had, any number of lives before it emerged in this particular version. So, you do, unlike the reporter, you do actually, as a writer, you can change things up until the final deadline. There's a point where, that's the other thing too. You have to let it go at some point. If you want to be a published author, you have to let the work go out into the world, even if it isn't perfect.
Well, I know when I'm finished, I think when there are times in editing that there are many iterations of this. And if you saw the first many versions of Her Perfect Life, you might think, oh golly, how did it turn out to be this? With starred reviews from Kirkus and Kirkus and Publishers Weekly, and a huge rave from Library Journal, all so fantastic. But the point is, when I am in my last stages of edits, I find myself in a situation where I realize that I'm just reading the book. I'm not looking for changes anymore. I've lost myself in the story. And I realize I'm done because I'm not trying to fix this anymore. And often at that moment, I just burst into tears because I think this is finished now. And I sort of happily let it go because I have that feeling of completion and good. And I love this. And here now it's for you.
So
do you have
well
any rituals, Hank, for when you finish a book? Like, do you indulge in a glass of wine or smoke a cigarette like in Misery?
I've never smoked a cigarette. Actually, I tried when I was in college, and I burned a hole in my bedspread and choked, and that was the end of that smoking thing. So a glass of wine when I'm finished. I'm more of the glass of wine during the process than
In the whole process.
than I am finished. I feel finished when the box of books arrives.
Oh.
And one of the things, another good piece of advice, Barbara, like as you both were asking, I guess Patrick, it was you, is to remember to celebrate. Because it's very easy to say, oh, finished with the book, good, great, now I have to do something else. Or here are the books that have arrived at my doorstep. Oh, great, good, I love these. Okay, go on to the next thing. Writers really need, and that's why I love your question, Patrick, is that really need to take that moment to say, you know what, I did this. And there were times when I didn't think I could, and now I did, and yay. So I don't have rituals, but I do mark it, Patrick, because I know very well for every book, there are moments when I think this is not going to happen. This is the time. This is not going to happen. And when it does, I need to celebrate a bit. We all do. We all need to celebrate.
Do you still get excited when the box of books arrives? The finished book, the first time you see it?
Sure. I mean, I hope I never get over that. I mean, that's just, you feel the heft of that box, and always, when the first box of books arrives, this is so silly, y'all. I'm looking at the comments, but there are no comments. Like, I got to see them. I'll come back and look at the comments, you all, when I can see it on the Facebook page. But you slit open the cardboard and you open the box, and what you see is another box because they're double boxed. So then you have to open the box again, and then there are the books. And it is great. And you look at them and look how beautiful this is. Look how shiny my little name is. And the title is shiny, and the back is shiny and beautiful. I wanted it to be a jewel, as I said earlier. And that's what I saw when I opened this box. Yeah, I loved it.
Let me ask a couple of these questions. Let's see. Christina, our friend from the local K-Jazz, says, Hank, what's your writing schedule like? Do you show up at 9:15 every day?
No. I'm really a night writer. It's interesting. I think it's because, again, as Barbara was talking about, the years of working for the news, if I got up at 9:15, I mean, I'm up, but if I came in and wrote at 9:15, I would just be clonked on my desk, bonk, asleep. But starting at about 2 o'clock, my writer metabolism starts really going. And I'm really good from like 2 till 6, and I think that's because my brain thinks I'm getting ready for the 6 o'clock news, and that metabolism has not gone away. And then I can start again at 7, and I go at night. I'm a really good night writer. And again, I think that's because of getting ready for the 11 o'clock news. I think my writer brain has stuck on my news schedule. So that's good. That's fine. So I get a lot of administrative stuff done during the morning. That's fine. Facebook and Twitter and Instagram find me, and blogs and preparation for events, and reading in the morning. And then at 2 o'clock, I try, and I'm not always successful, but I try to sort of make an appointment with myself and say at 2 o'clock, I'm going to start writing. So no laundry, no going to get the mail, no walking down the driveway to get the little new tomatoes, no procrastination anymore. I can do whatever I want until 2, and then I write. And it works. You were right, Barbara, earlier when you talked about that there is, you have to really be in charge of yourself. There's no boss of your writing except for yourself. And so you really have to be able to have the discipline to take control of the situation, or you won't get done. I mean, a book is math, a book is arithmetic. It's add and add and add. And if you don't add and add and add, there'll be no book, and that's a problem. I know Dennis Lehane used to talk about how he thought about his book so much that when he opened his manuscript, he was always surprised that more wasn't written because he'd thought about it so much. But it doesn't osmose into the computer. You have to sit down and do it.
Yeah, that's really interesting. There's a certain Pavlovian quality to all this. As a person who's currently potty training puppies, you have to rely on Pavlov. You have to get the puppy to a schedule, and train them. And, you've illustrated that perhaps we all are like that, but we all have different circadian rhythms. We all have different, because this question comes up all the time. Some people get up at 4 a.m. and write before their job, or, they send their kids off to school and write during the school hour or whatever. I think it's what you train yourself instinctively, to do that then works for you.
Out of a little bit of joy and a little bit of fear, and those things mixed together.
Anything else, Patrick?
Yeah, and then some people have to have a completely quiet house. Some people have to have the TV and the music going, and everybody's different.
Well, I can write a news story. I mean, I've written news stories, obviously, with sirens and hurricanes and fires and yelling and riots and and in the olden days, typewriters and people yelling and the wire machines dinging. And I can do that and it's fine. But if I'm writing in my novels, it's quiet. I can't have anything going on. I mean, I hear my husband walking down the hall and I say, don't come in here, don't come in here. So the quiet is very good for writing.
You were talking a little bit before about the all the pressures when you're on live television and everything has to be right, and you're thinking about all these different things that we as civilians might not consider. I'm sure you have some great stories about things when you were on the air live went horribly wrong and what you did to kind of get yourself out of that situation. Anything come to mind?
Well, I've had lights fall on me, the big light crashing in the background and you can't flinch, and church bells and sirens and those kinds of things. The crazy people thinking it's really funny if they say nasty things or say mean things, and you have to rely on the photographer to zoom in. I think that a scarier than a background thing is the knowledge that people are relying on you to tell them the real story. When I was, a couple of years ago, 10 years ago now, I guess, I was having a research day at Channel 7. And so I was dressed for research and sitting at my desk, and I got a call from my news director in mid-afternoon. And she said, "Can you get ready to go on live?" And I said, "Sure." This is something that happens all the time. If there's breaking news of some kind and I'm the person who's in the station, then I'm the one who goes on live. And so I said, "Sure, what's going on?" And she said, "I don't know, just kind of stand by." So I'm combing my hair and putting on lipstick and thinking, oh, this is going to be nothing again. And about 10 minutes later, she called me and said, "Get down here right now, right now, right now, get down here right now." And I grabbed my earpiece and put on my earpiece and ran down the 2 flights of stairs to the newsroom, plugged in my earpiece. Somebody slammed on a microphone and said, "There's been an explosion at the Boston Marathon and you're on in 5, 4. And I'm like, "What happened? Can you tell me what happened? Just tell me anything that happened." And they're like, "We don't know what happened at the finish line. Talk about the marathon. Talk about the finish line. You've been there. We don't know what happened. Just say anything and we'll get you the information as it comes." So I have to tell you that I thought, I don't think I can do this. My knees really felt weak. And then I thought, no, you're a storyteller. Just tell the story. So I've covered the marathon a million times, and I know what the finish line looks like, and I know who's there, and I know what it's like, and I knew what time it was, and I knew that the elite finishers would have been gone by that time. And so this would be sort of the middle of the pack coming through. And that was the Boston Marathon bombing. And I talked for 3 hours, and the reporters went out into the street and more information was coming in. And finally I was replaced by the real anchor people. But, that's the tension and that's the perfection. You don't want to, I knew that there were thousands of people listening to what I said and worrying about the people who were there and wondering what was going on. And it was the beginning of this incredible disaster in Boston. And that responsibility for that moment of making sure that everything worked is exactly what you're talking about, Patrick. That responsibility, I keep saying that for being a reporter. The other thing that happened though was, okay, I'll tell you this. 2 quick things. And then we're totally out of time. We've been talking way too long. Once I was doing a big investigative story about nuclear medicine and the radioactive isotopes that were kept in various labs. And we were doing a story about the lack of security for these radioactive isotopes. And we found that the security was really lax, that there were so many things missing from the labs, and they didn't have any idea where this stuff was. And one of the elements that is a radioactive isotope is krypton. There's radioactive krypton that they use in nuclear medicine. But in my story, I called it kryptonite, which is not which is not a real thing. And This was before the days of email. So as soon as I got off the air, my phone started ringing, and it was scientists laughing at me on the phone. They were just saying, have you been reading too many Superman comic books? You know, there's no such thing as kryptonite. And my editor hadn't caught it, and my news director hadn't caught it, and the executive producer hadn't caught it. Nobody had caught it. That's why you always want to have an editor who's smarter than you are. That's the key. And my final story about this was when I was filling in anchoring one Saturday night in Boston. And it was back in the day when they said, just read what's on the prompter. Read what's on the prompter. It doesn't matter what's on your script. Just read what's on the prompter. And because that can be newer on the prompter. So, okay. So I thought I was so proud of myself, and I was doing this great job on the news. And the news was over, and we were doing our close, and my anchor person colleague, my co-anchor, said rolled correctly. The prompter was rolling, and he read what was on the prompter, and it was, have a great Saturday night, everyone. I'm R.D. Saul. That was the co-anchor's name, R.D. Saul. But they had left. Well, so the prompter keeps going, and I say, thanks, R.D., and I'm Kate Sullivan. Have a wonderful evening. And then I thought, oh, that's the old prompter version of the script. Kate Sullivan was the person that I was replacing, and they had left her name on the prompter, and I had called myself the wrong name. And I just said, you know, I'm not really Kate Sullivan. I'm Hank Phillippi Ryan, and have a nice Saturday. But, you know, can you imagine? I called myself the wrong name. So I don't know.
And this is Lex Luthor.
Yeah. Except that would have been funny. So those are my two big, knock on wood, my two big only mistakes.
Somebody chimed in, you can count your blessings that was pre-social media.
Oh, yeah. Totally so. Can you even imagine? They'd be playing that tape. That tape does not exist right now. It only exists right here. So it's silly me. But yeah, oh, you're so right. And that's what's in Her Perfect Life, going back to the book, is everything she does is on social media. So if she makes a mistake, or if she looks unhappy, or if she snaps at someone, or if her little daughter is in the grocery store, that goes right on social media. And she's doomed. She's doomed. You know, her life could be over with one wrong word, one wrong text, one wrong email, one mistake, and her life and career are over.
Well, there's a driving need for fame and recognition, and everybody has a phone now. And one way that you can achieve it is, in fact, to pile on to somebody. I mean, every time I write an e-news and send it out to however many thousands of people it goes to, there's usually one mistake that I make because, you know, I'm doing it by myself, I'm doing it in a hurry, and I just don't see it. You know, I mean, it doesn't matter really what it is. And then there are all kinds of helpful people that write, you know, and I think it's too late. It's published, it's already out there. Clearly I didn't mean that. Why tell me? You know, I mean, it doesn't do any good at that point. That moment has passed. And yet, you know, social media means that people who never would have commented before, if they had to call or write, now can get to do that. So it's you know, social media. Oh, there's a dog coming into the room. Hello,
Barbara,
a big dog.
I bet you never got your name wrong, though.
No, but I've gotten other people's names wrong, and I can say that one of the things that really is distressing for an author is if you misspell their name or, you know, confuse them or something. I mean, you know, dates are hard to keep up with. Time zones are hard to keep up with. There's so much information and so much happening that the possibility for error seems to me to be increasing exponentially. But I've learned to have a fairly casual attitude about it, which is, oh, well.
I hate to, Barbara, I hate to out our former employee, Lori, who's just a wonderful woman, great person. But it was a packed store one night. I don't know if you were actually there, Barbara. And a packed house, and I believe it was for Ridley Pearson. And Lori said, well, please help me welcome John Connolly. I mean, Ridley Pearson, or something like that. It was just a bad one in front of
John Lesquire tells a hilarious story about he went to Barnes & Noble to do an event. And he was astonished when he came in that there was a table piled to the ceiling with all these books. And he thought, wow, they must anticipate, a much bigger success for this book than I'm anticipating. And then he realized as it went on that they thought he was John le Carré. So, these things happen. Anyway, this has been wonderful. Hank and I could talk for hours.
As you
I feel
see.
sure that we should probably draw a line here. And thank you all. One of the reasons we've talked all around Robin Hood's Barn here and all is because we can't really tell you about the core of her perfect life without ruining the book for you. And that's the hazard of doing an event when a book first publishes, is that you have to be so circumspect about how it works. So I certainly thank you all for watching it. Hank, a joy as ever to spend time with you.
I love Patrick showing the signed books that I spent so long signing books for you and sending them to you. So I'm incredibly thrilled that Poison Pen has signed books for your customers. And I urge you, no pressure, it's just my career, to please go to Poison Pen and get your own signed book.
She doesn't have a fallback job, so if she fails as an author, that's it, right? But in any case, do recommend to other people, because this video will stay on our Facebook page forever, that they watch it if they missed it, or they can download the podcast, because really word of mouth is, there's no better sales thing than to have you who are watching this recommend Hank's book and Hank to other people. That really is the best way it can go. So thank you, everybody, for watching. Hank, hi to Jonathan. Good night. See you soon.
Good night, everyone.
Bye.